Welcome to Food for Thought, now in its 18th year. Thank you for listening if you're new. Thank you for listening if you've been listening for years. Today's episode is hair loss and hair growth, how nutrients, genetics, and hormones impact your hair. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. You can find me at joyfulvegan.com if you'd like to join our incredible community. You can find the donate button at joyfulvegan.com or just go to patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau to become a supporting member at your chosen level. You can also at joyfulvegan.com pre-order your copy of my new book, A Year of Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, Plant-Based, and Cruelty-Free. You can buy a signed copy from me, or you can pre-order from any one of the retailers I link to from joyfulvegan.com. You can find all of that on the homepage, links to that on the homepage. I implore you to do so. Pre-orders help new books so much, and I would be so grateful. At joyfulvegan.com, you can also book one-on-one sessions. You can get free tickets for the book launch celebration if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area. You can register for the related Compassion in Action online conference of 2025 called Finding Hope in the Dark and During Difficult Times. It is currently deeply discounted for a limited time, so do not delay. All of that is at joyfulvegan.com. I have been very busy. Also at joyfulvegan.com, you can find a new recipe ebook. It's gorgeous with gorgeous photos and 20 recipes for romance. Decadent dishes for intimate dining. You do not have to have a Valentine in order to make these recipes. We're talking toasted quinoa salad. We're talking saffron spiked Moroccan stew. We're talking tempeh bacon and Tuscan white beans with sun-dried tomatoes and penne arrabbiata and polenta hearts, chocolate fondue, chocolate tart, flourless chocolate tart. So you can find all of that in the new recipe ebook called Recipes for Romance. You can even find love potions, cocktails, and mocktails in this ebook. So on this day, which is the 30th anniversary since the first date with my husband, I wanted to share that with you. So all of that is at joyfulvegan.com. And let's get into today's topic that has been in the hopper for years. I started drafting this episode back in 2018, 2019, when I had a harrowing experience related to hair loss. And I've been meaning to share this with you ever since. Now, while the information in this episode will be interesting to you, whether you're male or female, the truth is this episode is geared mostly toward women. Hair loss is often discussed in the context of men, or let's just say it's been normalized. And I'm not saying that hair loss isn't upsetting for men. I don't want to imply that because I can't imagine what it's like to lose your hair completely, whether you're a man or a woman. But it can be especially distressing for women, I think, especially because it hasn't been normalized. We don't talk about it. There are a lot of societal expectations around femininity and beauty and self-image. And so, again, I really sympathize with you if you are a man and you are losing your hair or if you've lost your hair. But women's hair loss is less openly discussed. And I think it can be isolating and it can be, frankly, I think shameful. I think shame is a word I would use when it comes to women who experience hair loss or hair thinning. And the causes of hair loss in women can be quite different from those in men as well. Genetics definitely play a role for women, but hair loss for women is often linked to hormonal fluctuations and even hairstyling practices that men don't typically have much experience with. And so my goal today is to acknowledge the unique emotional and social and physiological factors at play for women who experience hair loss, hair thinning, hair shedding, helping my female listeners feel seen and supported and empowered with facts and hopefully solutions. And at least for the start of this episode, I'm going to frame hair loss in the context of my personal experience in the hope that it helps you if you're experiencing something similar. And throughout the episode, I'm going to be debunking myths about what the causes are, what the solutions are. I'll be talking about nutrients and genetics and hormones and supplements and treatments and foods. And I'll be sharing my favorite hair products with you. And I will be encouraging you to get more data for your own personal experience rather than relying on generic internet-based information, some of which is false, some of which is old, some of which is not tested, and some of which is not tailored to your particular needs. So we have a lot to cover. I just told my husband, he said, I'm going to have lunch. And I said, no, because I'm going to record. And he said, how long is it going to take? And I said, it's going to take a couple hours to record. So not that the episode at the end is going to be a couple hours, but it's going to be a lot. Maybe I'm going to guess an hour and 15 minutes by the time this gets edited down. So sit back, and I hope this brings you comfort and insight and information and inspiration. Now, because of the sensitive nature of this topic, I want to start off with a disclaimer that this episode and its contents are for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. I'm sharing my experience with you, and I'll be sharing what I know based on research I've done. I am not a doctor, I am not a dermatologist, I am not a nutritionist, and I am not a dietitian. So please listen with all of that in mind. And so with that out of the way, I want to acknowledge that losing your hair can be deeply emotional, really upsetting, really frustrating, really confusing because of all the misinformation out there, just because of all the information out there. Not all of it's misinformation, but there's a lot out there. And you could just find so much and you just throw it all at the wall and nothing helps. You can feel really frustrated. And I definitely felt that way, and I will share that story with you. For women, especially, and again, I don't want to imply this isn't the case for men, but for women especially, hair is part of our identity. And the feeling of just frustration and sadness and loss it's real. And you're not alone. Hair loss for one reason or another impacts millions of women. So I want to say that you're not alone. And it must also be said that you're not alone, whether you're vegan or not. And I say this because I think there's a temptation to feel like you've caused your hair loss if you're vegan, that you're doing something wrong, and that maybe you need to stop being vegan because you're not getting the right nutrients, or you're doing something wrong being vegan and experiencing hair loss. Now, in the end, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to try and respond to that as well, because we're going to be talking about nutrient deficiencies and which ones might contribute to hair loss. But please hear me and hear me now. What I want to say is that being vegan is not a symptom. Just because you're vegan, that's not a cause of anything. If you're deficient in a nutrient, it's not because you're vegan. It's because you're not taking in or absorbing enough of said nutrient. If you recently experienced a dramatic weight loss at the same time you stopped eating animal products and you started losing hair after the weight loss, it could very well be due to the dramatic weight loss rather than the abstention from animal products. If you're gaining weight, it's not because you're vegan. It's because your calorie intake exceeds your expenditure, your calorie expenditure, regardless of the source, regardless of the source of the food, whether it's animal-based or plant-based. If you're low in energy, it's not because you're vegan. It's because you're not eating enough calories or carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, or other essential nutrients. If you're getting sick often, it's not because you're vegan. It's because your immune system may be compromised due to stress or lack of sleep or nutrient imbalances. If you're struggling with hair loss, it's not because you're vegan. It's because of potential nutrient deficiencies. It's because of genetics. It's because of hormone fluctuations or other health conditions. And we're going to talk about what all of those are and the role they play. Does that make sense? So it's not enough to just say, I'm losing my hair or my hair is thinning, it must be because I'm vegan. There are so many issues at play, and we're going to talk about those today. And to get to the bottom of these issues, if you are experiencing hair loss, I am going to suggest that you seek support from a healthcare provider, possibly also a specialist. They're probably going to refer you to a dermatologist because that's who takes care of things like hair loss. But relying on the internet or ChatGPT or whatever you're relying on, it's not enough. You need to see your healthcare provider. But I'm jumping ahead. I'm jumping ahead because in the end, that is probably what you're going to want to do, because even if you want to get blood work done, you're going to need to see a healthcare provider. So I'm going to give you information, and I'm grateful that I am one of your sources of information. I don't think I'm in the same category as ChatGPT, but in the end, this is just information that I have gathered based on my experience and based on the sources that I look to. And in the end, it's going to hopefully help contribute to you solving the problem. But in the end, the problem is going to be solved with help from possibly your healthcare provider. So my story. I am no different than any other woman for whom hair is a part of their identity. For me, my hair has been a huge part of my identity and certainly part of my self-esteem. And it's actually really funny because the topic of my hair was actually something that was a bone of contention for me regarding my mother. And I know you know that I had, a stressful, just a strained relationship with my mother for many years, many decades. And one of the bones of contention for me regarding my mother was my hair, because I have always had a lot of hair. And when I started getting older, when I started, not even when I was getting older, when I say that, I mean, when I started growing out of my youth, my girlhood, I would look back at pictures of myself when I was really young, and I was so resentful as a young girl that my mother had kept my hair really, really short. And she didn't just keep my hair really short, she cut it herself. And I looked like a boy. Now, it's fine if you're a little girl and you want to look like a little boy, but I was a little girl who did not want to look like a little boy. I wanted to look like a little girl. And I remember coming out of a grocery store once, and I was opening the door and a mother was coming in with her daughter or something. And I remember I was like 7, and I remember that the mother said, "Honey, look out, let the little boy through." I was like, "I'm not a little boy." And it was because of the way my mother cut my hair, because it was like a bowl cut. And I used to feel jealous in a very immature way, not in like a significantly envious way, but in like an immature way, that my sister, who had bone straight hair, had straight long hair, and it always looked perfect. And she looked like a pretty little girl, and I looked like a boy with a bowl cut. It wasn't a great cut. My only consolation, I used to say, was like when I was born, and I was born premature, so I had no hair. My sister had a ton of hair, but as I grew up, I had a lot of hair and my sister had thin hair. But that was like this really petty way of me feeling better about it when I was a teenager. But I really used to just feel like, why did you cut my hair so short? And my mother used to say it's because she didn't know what to do with my hair. And when I started dealing with my own hair, I started understanding what she was going through, because my hair has always been just a very difficult thing to control. And for my mother, who is, a mother of 2 young children and a husband who was not very helpful, someone who had to control this massive head of hair, it was just easier for her to cut it. And so I get it now. It's been a couple decades since I've understood that. And I think we used to laugh about it at some point. But I used to say, it was a horrible cut. And so it became clear to me when I started dealing with my own hair that it was a pain. But when I was able to control my hair and control the length of my hair, I grew it long. And like I said, I sympathized with my mother when I looked back, because my hair has never been an easy head of hair to deal with. It's naturally wavy, and it's not like super, super thick, but I was always very lucky to have a lot of it. And so it was also just unruly. I was never one of these people, and I'm not one of these people. I have girlfriends who are like, I don't wash my hair for weeks, and I'm like, what? I have to wet my hair every day. I have to style it every day. I can't just wake up and be like, oh, my hair looks great. I'll just go about my day. I have to do it. At least that's what I feel in order to feel good about going about my day. But it's always been it's an ordeal. My hair is an ordeal. And so, interestingly, now I was a child of the 70s and 80s. I was a teenager in the 80s, so I did have big hair. I may or may not include my high school yearbook photo on my website for the show notes for today's episode. I don't mind. It was permed. I don't know why I permed it. It was already wavy and it was big. Now, I was in New Jersey and I was in the 80s. I did not have the big kind of hair that I would see girls in the bathroom in the 80s in Livingston, New Jersey, teasing with a teasing comb and then spraying with hairnet. I did not do that, but the top was shorter than the rest, and so I definitely curled it back, and it was definitely big and puffy on the top, and then permed for the rest of it. So yeah, I was that. Now, when I moved to California in '98, and it went through for several years, I cut my hair pretty short, interestingly, and it looked cute. I'll put some pictures up. It looked cute. If you actually have my vegan cooking DVD that I made back in 2004. Yeah, I think it was 2004. My hair was really short. It was cute. I can't believe that was 21 years ago. But by about 2006, I started growing it out again. And I think one of the reasons I made it really short and then I made it even shorter was because I just never really felt like I knew how to handle my hair. And as I got older and I started feeling like I had more self-esteem, probably by my 30s, took a while, and I started feeling pretty, which I didn't feel for a lot of kind of my early years. I took a lot of pride in my hair and I figured out kind of how to handle it and how to manage it and how to accept it and deal with the waviness and deal with it. And I've been really grateful. My hair has kind of, I think, been part of my identity as a public figure. I've always gotten a lot of compliments on my hair. And that means a lot. I'm a human being. I'm a vain human being. What can I say? And so in the last, 15 years, I've kind of figured out, 20 years maybe, mostly 50, I would say 15 years. I figured out kind of now maybe more than that. I would say since 2009, 2010, 11, I figured out I like my hair and how to manage it. And I always sought out the best stylist for my hair. I remember there was a time when I went to a special salon that specialized in kind of wavy hair. And, finding the right hairstylist was always really important. And I didn't always stay with the same one for very long because I always felt like they have to really get my hair. They have to really get it. And at a stylist that I went to in 2018, I think I was going to her probably in 2017. I think so. But definitely by 2018, I had just gotten my hair done. And she was at a salon. She is still there at a salon I could walk to from my house. And so I really liked that. I hate driving, so I really liked that. And I thought, well, that really works out that I found a stylist who can do my hair and I can walk to it. And I got my hair done. And when I say done, I mean cut and highlighted. And a couple days later, I was looking in the mirror and I was like, what has she done to my hair? What happened? I can't style it. I can't do it. It looks awful. It looks awful. And it felt brittle and it felt thin. And especially my bangs, I just felt like it was really thin. And I called her and I was like, I don't know what happened, but I think, can I come back in so you can fix it? Because I don't know what you did. I mean, I was very nice to her, but I was like, something's wrong. Something's really wrong. And I don't know what happened. So I went in and she was very nice. And she was like, I didn't do this. But she showed me kind of especially the top. And she said, yeah, it looks like you've lost some hair. And I was devastated because she was right. And I would look in the mirror. I couldn't even look in the mirror. I couldn't even stand to look in the mirror. And I could see that it was thinner, especially on top. And it felt straggly and looked straggly and brittle. and dull. And the worst thing, so she fixed it the best she could, but I mean, there was nothing to do. There was nothing to do. There was nothing to do in terms of making it grow. Like it had thinned. And it was like a switch had turned on. It was like a dramatic thinning. Although I would say maybe I noticed it dramatically, because when I looked back from then, I did remember thinking when I was in the shower, like when I would brush my hair, like I remember seeing more hair than usual. Not like gobs of hair coming out, not like gobs going down the shower drain, but I remember thinking, gosh, I feel like my hair's like coming out more than it usually does, right? Because we shed hair every day. It's normal. But I remember looking back and going, yeah, maybe, I think so. But the thing that was really difficult is I was leaving for a group trip to France in a week. And I was really self-conscious about the way I looked. I felt really awful. And so right before I left for the trip, I reached out to my doctor to get some blood work done and told him, like, I've lost some hair. I don't know what the cause is, but I want to get some blood work done. And I remember we didn't do a whole panel, but I like named the nutrients that I wanted done. And we did it. I got B12 checked, iron, zinc, vitamin D, protein, and I think I got folate checked as well. Now I'm going to talk on in a little bit. I'm going to talk further on about some other nutrients aside from these that are touted to help hair, or that are touted as, or that are identified as those nutrients that you might be deficient in that could be causing hair loss. So I mentioned B12, iron, zinc, vitamin D, protein. I'm also going to talk about biotin, which is vitamin B7, and omega-3 fatty acids and more. Okay. So I reached out to my doctor and I got this blood work done, and I went to my gynecologist and I got thyroid checked and I got hormones checked and adrenal glands and all of it. And so what were the results? I remember vividly being on the airplane, going to France, going on our Alsace trip, flying to Paris, when I got a phone call from my doctor telling me that the results were in and everything looked okay, except my vitamin D was low and my vitamin B12 was very low. Now, for vitamin D, I was 31.5 out of a range of 30 to 100. So it wasn't under. He didn't call it deficient. I don't know. But it was low and it was right on the edge. And actually, after more research I did note that I wasn't in deficiency. I wasn't even in insufficiency, which is considered between 21 and 29. But I was low at 31 and a half. So I noted that. For B12, I was 265. And normal B12 levels are typically 200 to 900. So I was 265 in a range that starts at 200. So again, not deficient, not truly deficient, but low. Now with nutrient deficiencies, and we're going to talk about this a lot, you don't tend to just have one symptom. You tend to have more than one symptom. And with a B12 deficiency, there are symptoms like fatigue, weakness, neurological issues like numbing and tingling in your fingers. I didn't have any of those. And still, the second I landed in Paris, I ran to a pharmacy and I got B12 and I got vitamin D. And I started taking them immediately, daily. And when I got home, and by the way, the trip was great, but I was self-conscious the whole time. I should have just worn a hat the whole time. I can't look at pictures from that trip. So I got home and I got my blood work done again in January. And my B12 was now 975 and my vitamin D was 37.9. So remember, it was 31.5 before, it was 37.9 now. My B12 was 265 and it was now 975. And it looks like I may have tested my folate also. Now, I must have been concerned about folic acid, and I must have done research that said that, a deficiency in folic acid could potentially lead to hair loss. Now, I'm telling you this because I know if you are experiencing this, you are doing your own research So I'm just sharing this with you because I was doing my own research. And if you're looking up folic acid, sure, like that's, I mean, so many nutrients as a true deficiency come up as a possible reason for hair loss. So it looks like I had tested my folate again, maybe the second time, and I was in above 20, and the normal range is above 3. So I was like totally fine. But remember, by the way, folate is the natural form of vitamin B9, and folate comes from foliage, the same word for leaf, right? It's found in foods like leafy greens. So folate, if you're eating, a healthy diet of, greens and salads, and which I was, you're very unlikely to be deficient in folate. Folic acid is folate in its synthetic form, and it's used in supplements and fortified foods. Folate is easier for the body to process, but some people have difficulty converting it in their bodies, so that's why they take folic acid. Now, most people don't need to take folic acid supplements if they get enough folate from their diet, but also there are people in particular categories, women who are pregnant or trying to conceive, people who eat poor diets and don't get folate at all, and people with malabsorption disorders like celiac or Crohn's disease, where your body is preventing proper folate absorption. People with anemia also. So I must have read something about folic acid in hair loss, so I must have started taking that too. But I don't take folic acid supplements at all anymore, and I don't think anything I take, my complement essentials or my omega complex, there's no folic acid in them. Okay, so I did all the things. My B12 numbers were back to normal. My D numbers were great. My folate numbers were great. My hormones checked out as normal. Everything looked good. While a couple nutrients were on the low side, I didn't have any deficiencies. Yay. Was happy about that. Now, I was also looking at other things when I was doing my research. And again, I know you're going to find this. There are a million bits of information out there that's going to tell you what foods to eat for hair growth. And I want to say this too, and we'll talk about this more. There is a difference between foods for hair growth or supplements for hair growth and reversing hair loss. Okay. So you're going to find a ton of information out there, and just make sure that you know the difference. Now, I was looking at things that could obviously stop hair loss and promote hair growth. And some of the things I was finding around food was like fermented foods, right? Soy. I was finding a lot about soy. Now, I was already eating soy. I love tofu. Soy milk has always been my go-to plant-based milk because I make it from scratch. And so maybe I increased my soy consumption a little, but not a ton, not that I remember. And I remember reading about fermented foods and going, oh God, because I'm not a huge fan of fermented foods. I like tempeh, don't get me wrong, love tempeh. But I'm not a fan of sauerkraut, not a fan of kimchi. I have to say I'm starting to become a little bit more of a fan of kimchi because of the spiciness. If you get a good kimchi. Not a fan of kombucha, not a fan of natto, definitely not natto. Love miso, don't eat yogurt a lot, and I eat tempeh. But I was looking at that, and I'm like, really, am I going to increase my fermented food intake? I may have tried it for a week, but I didn't keep at it. And one of the things I started realizing, especially once I got back from my trip and my numbers had righted themselves and the hormones were checking out, and I talked to my gynecologist several times, all the things. One of the things I realized was I actually am not identifying that I'm continuing to lose hair, right? I wanted my hair to grow back because it was still, off. It wasn't the way it had been. But I remember thinking, I'm not losing more, right? It wasn't continuing to thin. I wasn't continuing to see hair fall out more than normal. And so I made a decision to just wait and see. Now, I see hair more than normal wasn't falling out. It is normal for 100 to 150 strands a day to fall out of our head. That's what it looks like. It's normal. It's normal to shed 100 to 150 strands of hair a day. So when you see hair coming out and going into the shower drain or hair on your hairbrush, that is nothing to be alarmed about. What I saw was definitely hair thinning. Okay. But it wasn't necessarily because I saw it coming out of the drain. It was because I saw it on my head. I saw fewer hairs, strands on my head. And so, given that I had increased the intake of things like B12 and vitamin D and all of the other thing, my complement essentials, can't rave about them enough. And given that I was eating a nutrient dense diet, I decided to be patient and wait. Also, at that time, I became acutely aware that when it happened, I was 48 years old, going on 49. My birthday is early March. So I was going on 49. And I realized, especially after, I was going to the gynecologist and talking to her, that I was in perimenopause. Now, I'm going to cover perimenopause and menopause in their own episode, but I have to talk about it here a little bit because it's very related to this topic. Very related. So briefly, perimenopause is the transitional phase before menopause when hormone levels, especially estrogen, begin to fluctuate. It can start as early as the 30s, but it's more commonly found to start in the 40s, your 40s, lasting an average of 4 to 10 years. So I was 48 going on 49. I don't know when it had started. Well, I can't say I don't know when it had started. I keep a journal every day, and so it's not online, so I can't go search for it, but I know that I was writing in my journal when I was getting my period and how long a time was passing when I wasn't getting it. So I was identifying the fact that my period was irregular. And I remember writing down in December of 2018 before that trip. Yeah, I remember identifying that I was in a very irregular cycle. Did I say irregular? Irregular cycle. So perimenopause technically ends when a woman has gone 12 consecutive months without a period, marking the onset of menopause. Now, I was still getting my period. It was just irregular. And I remember thinking like, oh, every 6 months I was getting it. So I was in this phase of my life that I don't know, I wasn't in denial about it, but it's one of those experiences for me, I will say, that just sneaks up on you. Like it snuck up on me because 40s is very young. And I always, thought in my head, menopause, perimenopause, that's for people in their 60s or 70s. I'm in my 40s. That's not me. But it was me because that's when it starts. And so I remember even hearing from friends who were in their early 40s when they were having irregular periods, like we're kind of in this place of like, I don't think it's really perimenopause. You seem too young. No, it can absolutely happen in your early 40s. It's usually something that happens kind of more in your late 40s, but that's what was happening. And so I think I was just like not piecing it together. And when I started looking back and mapping it all out, I was definitely in perimenopause. So we're going to talk about that more in that episode, the episode on menopause. But aside from irregular periods, other experiences during perimenopause include hot flashes, night sweats, mood changes like irritability and anxiety or depression, sleep disturbances, weight gain. Now, I didn't really have those other symptoms. And I remember going to my gynecologist, and because I didn't have anything else regarding the hair loss, she was a little doubtful. She was a little doubtful, skeptical that I was in perimenopause, which I look back on that, I go, really? How could you have been like, I don't go to her anymore. I go to a different gynecologist, but I look back and go, really? Like I was getting my periods very irregularly. I was experiencing some hair loss, but she didn't see I didn't have any other symptoms. And so she attributed that she's like, it could be. I remember she said, it could be, but you eat so well. So in that way, maybe I'm not surprised you don't have the other symptoms. But I think that's what contributed to me kind of not really piecing it together, but I finally pieced it together. I wasn't experiencing all these other things, but I was experiencing being 48, going on 49 and irregular periods and this hair loss. Now, very interestingly, at the same time I was experiencing this trauma, 2 other really close girlfriends were also experiencing this trauma of hair loss. And one was and is vegan. The other one's not. I would say almost mostly vegan. She doesn't eat a lot of, well, I mean, everybody says that, right? But she ate very healthfully, but she wasn't vegan. The other one was. And we were all around the same age. I think the one who's vegan is a couple years younger than me, but we were all experiencing kind of this hair loss. Now, these are two very good friends of mine who I love dearly, and both of them are prone to being a little dramatic. So not that I denied their hair loss, but I would look at them and go, you look great. You look great. But we all have, our own perception of ourselves, and we know more than anybody. And, I remember one of them kind of pulled up her hair by her temples, and it did look like there had been some thinning there. And the other one, they were talking about like clumps of hair coming out. I'm like, you have to be exaggerating. There's no like bald spots. You look great. And we were all freaking out because we were all having this experience with our hair. We were all in our late 40s, mid 40s, one of them, but mid 40s, late 40s. So we all reacted differently. I decided to, bump up my nutrients and wait. One of them was, she was just getting different treatments. I remember she got Rogaine. And the other one decided to do a treatment that I thought was quite extreme, but she went through with it. And that is the therapy called PRP, platelet-rich plasma therapy, where they basically take blood from another part of, like, they take your own blood, and then they I think inject it back into your hair follicles. The idea is to improve blood flow to the scalp and encourage hair regrowth. So I remember thinking, wow, that seems, because they like take your blood, they process it in a centrifuge to separate the the plasma, and then they inject it into your scalp. I thought, that is really extreme. And I remember she said, like, didn't really work. All right. Oh my God. But if that's something you want to try and your dermatologist might recommend it, then that's a treatment you can do. I think it's a treatment for a very particular kind of hair loss, which we'll talk about. And I wasn't prepared to go through that. And so I remember buying Rogaine, but being really hesitant to use it, because if you read it, if you stop using it, any hair growth you experience, you'll lose again when you stop using the product. And I was like, I don't want to like put this stuff on my head and then like lose it again. I have to use it the rest of my life. So I decided to not do it. Now, the other thing that was coming up when we were all trying to figure out what the causes were, and I remember my friends in particular were saying that it was probably stress. And I remember being skeptical about that. And I still kind of am skeptical about that, because my understanding, and I wasn't an expert then, I'm not an expert now, but I remember even then I thought, nah, my understanding is that hair loss due to stress is typically triggered by a significant stressor, like an acute stressor, rather than like everyday low-level stressors. And that could be physical trauma, like a severe illness, like severe weight loss, like surgery, right? Like childbirth could be that, like some kind of like physical trauma. It could be an emotional trauma. It could be the death of a loved one. It could be a divorce. It could be some kind of emotional trauma. And none of us were experiencing those things. And, it can be a chronic stress. It doesn't have to be acute stress. I just didn't perceive that I was going through that. Like, chronic stress, like taking care of, an elderly parent, like if you're the main caregiver, or serious financial hardship. None of us were going through these kind of chronic stressors or acute stressors. And so I just didn't see that that's what it was. So we were all trying to figure this out. And none of us had one answer. Like, we didn't have an answer. And they never came up with one. But we were asking the questions, right? Was it stress? Was it because I wasn't eating enough fermented foods? I wasn't eating enough kimchi? Was it hormones? Was it a single nutrient deficiency? Was it aging? Was it genetics? Like we were asking these questions. So we're going to dive deep into these specifics, especially the single nutrients that could cause the single nutrient deficiencies that could cause hair loss. And we're going to talk about the different types of hair loss and the underlying causes of those different types, because it's really helpful to know what kind of hair loss you're dealing with. And knowing the kind of hair loss you're dealing with can kind of help you figure out what the causes were and what the remedies might be. So that's where we're going to go to next. Before we do, I want to just talk about our amazing sponsor today, and one who is very fitting for this topic. And it is a coincidence, absolutely, because you've heard me talk about them before, and that is Plain Products, the perfect sponsor for this topic. I switched to Plain Products years ago when I was starting my zero waste journey, and I've discovered their zero waste company. And I used to use Aveda, but I didn't want to keep buying plastic bottles. And so I very tenuously, I remember being really doubtful because I loved the products I was using before. And I thought, well, I'm going to give these a try at Plain Products. And I fell in love with them. Their conditioner, their shampoo. At the time, they didn't have a hair repair and a styling gel, but now they do. And I fell in love with them because of their ethics, because of their business model, because of the quality of their products. And they're just an incredible vegan, ethics-based, sister-owned company. And so as a zero waste company, you order, you use the product, you send those products back in the same box that you got your products in, and they refill them and reuse them. So they keep plastic out of landfills. It's a total closed loop, and it's brilliant, and it's simple, and it's sustainable. And they also have body lotion and face wash and toner and more, but it's their hair products that got me hooked. And so when you look at my hair today, that is because of Plain Products. And you can try them, you can get them. Anytime you use my link and my code, you get 15% off, like every single time you buy. So I would just say, get the link. It's over at joyfulvegan.com. Bookmark it in your browser, and you can find the discount code over at joyfulvegan.com as well. If you go to joyfulvegan.com, you should see them on the homepage. If you don't, click on any blog or podcast post, including today's episode, and you will see their link and the coupon code in the sidebar. And you need to use that link every time, and you need to use the code every time you purchase from them to get 15% off every time. So thank you, Plain Products. Love you, grateful for you. Thanks for all you do. And thank you to all of our supporting members as well. You can become part of our community at patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thanks to everyone who supports, everyone who's a supporting member. And thanks especially to my heroes and angels, Angelica Torres, Lofton, Karma Whitford, Rachel Lovell, Jennifer Statmiller, PJ Schuster, Tina Atwell, Ranjini Mohan, Risa Rybakov, and Brooke Boussard. So let's take a look at the different types of hair loss. Number one, you would have heard of this. Probably, I've seen it abbreviated AGA. I may use that because it is a long mouthful. Androgenic alopecia. So androgenic alopecia used to be called male pattern baldness or male, pattern hair loss. It's now called pattern hair loss. You can see that it was called male pattern hair loss in the name androgenic because andro comes from the Greek word for man, for male. Gen means producing or originating. So androgenic means it refers to the influence of male hormones, androgens, like testosterone, and like DHT, which is a hormone like testosterone called dihydrotestosterone, so DHT. So that's androgenic. The alopecia part, if you remember, if you've listened to my podcast, the Animology podcast, I think I did it in the regular Food for Thought podcast, but I talked about alopecia being an animology. So that means it's an animal related word because the Greek word alopecia means baldness, and alopecia, the Greek word alopex, means fox in Greek because foxes were thought to shed their fur due to mange, and that gave rise to the term alopecia. So it refers to foxes who lose their hair because of mange. So alopecia means baldness. So androgenic alopecia literally means baldness caused by male hormones, reflecting the role of androgens like testosterone and DHT in hair follicle shrinkage and hair loss. And this is related to women as well. And that's why today it's called pattern hair loss, but the technical name still has andro in it. So androgenic alopecia, and it affects both men and women. It's most common in adults, often starting in their 20s and 40s, and it affects about 50% of men by age 50, 70% of men by age 70, and it affects 40% of women by age 50, with incidence increasing with age. Now, it's caused primarily by genetics. So the hair loss, the baldness that you think about, kind of the baldness that's normalized in our society, it's caused by genetics and sensitivity to those male hormones, to those androgens like DHT, which shrink hair follicles, the sensitivity to which shrink hair follicles. So having the genetics and prone to the sensitivity to those male hormones, that is what causes the hair follicles to shrink, and that's how you lose your hair, and that's why they don't grow back. Now, people can do transplants, you can do other things, and we'll talk about Rogaine toward the end, but that's what AGA, that's what androgenic alopecia is. So over time, what happens is the testosterone, the DHT, binds to receptors in the hair follicles and shrinks them. It's a process called miniaturization. And over time, this leads to thinner hair and eventually hair loss. So DHT is present in both men and women. Women have low amounts of testosterone, but men typically have higher levels, making them more prone to this male pattern baldness. In women, the condition can develop or worsen during menopause as estrogen and progesterone drop and the testosterone is higher. And that's why women can experience this as well during menopause when the estrogen and when the female hormones drop and the male hormones are more prevalent. And that increases the relative impact of those male hormones, the androgens like DHT. So that's why it's related to menopause, but it is genetic. It's a genetic condition. And if you have the genetics and you have the sensitivity to those male hormones, which you can experience more of when you reduce your female hormones during menopause, you can experience hair loss. Now, men typically experience this kind of hair loss at receding hairlines, which you can imagine, or balding at the crown, right? So again, that's what you can imagine. So that's why you also have kind of bald on top, but still some hair around the crown, but at the very top of the crown, bald. Women see this hair loss, especially at the top of the scalp or where their part is. So that part becomes wider. And that's what you might be experiencing. I do one-on-ones, and I have had actually recently quite a few one-on-ones with women who've reached out to me about different nutrient issues and health issues, and specifically around hair loss. And so I know a couple of the people I've spoken to, they had that receding scalp. So the scalp widens, and that could very well be caused by the androgenic alopecia. Number 2, the second type of hair loss we're going to talk about is telogen effluvium. I love the word effluvium. So telogen effluvium is a temporary shedding condition that occurs when a significant number of hair follicles enter the telogen phase, which is the resting phase of the hair cycle, prematurely, leading to increased shedding. The term telogen effluvium comes from the Greek word telos, which means end. So that refers to the end phase, the resting phase of the hair growth cycle. And the Latin word effluvium, meaning a flowing out. Okay. The cause of telogen effluvium is triggered by stressors like severe illness, surgery, major stress, the stuff we talked about earlier, and hormonal shifts, and nutrient deficiencies, and a reaction to certain medications and chronic conditions like thyroid disorders. But it's usually triggered by a particular stressor, like you enter perimenopause, like you enter menopause, like you have a nutrient deficiency. So it usually occurs suddenly within weeks or within months of a trigger. So imagine, like, you have nutrient deficiency that doesn't happen, just once. It occurs suddenly within weeks or months of that trigger. Androgenic alopecia, on the other hand, develops gradually over years. Now, the pattern of telogen effluvium affects the entire scalp, and it's characterized by diffuse shedding, whereas androgenic alopecia, as I mentioned, causes thinning in specific areas like the hairline and the crown in men, or a widening part, or even the top of the crown for women. Now, my experience was more of a telogen effluvium, in overall diffuse shedding. Diffuse shedding refers to like hair loss that occurs evenly across the entire scalp, rather than in specific areas like the crown or the hairline or the part. And it results in overall thinning of the hair, giving a less dense appearance. And that's what I saw. That is definitely what I was experiencing. Now, I've heard from some of you who have experienced that as well. And I've heard from some of you who've experienced more of the widening part, which is more characteristic of AGA. So just knowing the patterns of the different types of hair loss might help you kind of figure out, oh gosh, is this potentially telogen effluvium? Like, is it potentially a nutrient deficiency, or is it related to my, hormonal shifts, or is it more of an androgenic alopecia and related to genetics based on how the hair loss is happening? So that might help you. The good news is that telogen effluvium is temporary, and the hair usually regrows once the underlying cause is resolved or once the trigger is resolved. So for me, the way I think of this is that the telogen effluvium is a reaction to something like a stressor, like menopause, and androgenic alopecia is a condition. So telogen effluvium is a reaction to something like a stressor, like menopause, and androgenic alopecia is a condition that is greatly influenced by genetics. Telogen effluvium is typically temporary. Once the trigger is addressed, the hair regrowth usually begins within about 3 to 6 months. And we'll talk more about the treatments below, including for AGA, but AGA is typically permanent. Because the hair follicles have shrunk, the hair doesn't grow back. Then you have other types of hair loss. I'm just going to list them quickly here in case it helps you. Alopecia areata, which means patchy baldness. This is a condition where hair loss occurs in small round patches, like on the scalp or in other parts of the body, due to an autoimmune condition where the body attacks the hair follicles. And that's often triggered by stress or genetics. And you've seen that if people have experienced patches of hair being completely, disappeared from their head. That is usually some kind of really serious stressor that caused it, but it is an autoimmune condition. There is no cure, but in mild cases, the hair usually grows back. So that's alopecia, again, baldness, areata, which means patchy. Then there's traction alopecia. So again, baldness, but hair loss, hair missing. And this refers to tractio, meaning a drawing or a pulling from Latin, and that refers to hair loss that is caused by the pulling, but hair loss that occurs from prolonged tension or pulling on the hair, and that's often from tight hairstyles like braids or ponytails or extensions. Then you have anagen effluvium. I mentioned telogen is the resting phase. Anagen is the growth stage of the hair cycle. So anagen effluvium means shedding that occurs during the growth phase and that is abruptly interrupted. So when the anagen, the growth stage, is abruptly interrupted, and that's often due to some kind of toxic exposure, chemotherapy, radiation, that kind of thing. Now, this is typically reversible once the triggering factor, once the chemotherapy or the toxic exposure is removed or completed, and hair usually grows back within 1 to 3 months after the end of treatment. It might take 6 to 12 months or longer for full regrowth, depending on the severity and the duration of the trigger. So when I look back on all of this and I really dug deep into this, I think for me, it was most likely telogen effluvium, which is more of that diffuse shedding, the thinning, rather than a receding of the hairline or widening of my part. That was the case for me. So was it for me the nutrient deficiency? I'm going to talk more about that. We're going to talk about those specific nutrients. Was it hormones? Was it fermented foods? I think for me, it was the hormones. Now, that doesn't mean there couldn't have been a contributing factor, like I was low in vitamin D and low in, B12. It's possible. No matter what, bumping up my nutrients, those single nutrients, it's going to be a benefit for all the things and all the reasons we need those nutrients. So we'll talk more about that when I get to the nutrients. But where am I now? Where am I now? It's several years later. It's 2025 as I'm recording this. I'm about to turn 55 and my hair has not lost. I have not thinned out again. Like I haven't had an experience where there's an obvious change in the thinning. I want to say my hair is back to normal, but I don't think that's an accurate way to put it, because normal compared to what? My hair is not what it was when I was 20. My hair is not what it was when I was 30 or even 40. My hair is different. It's not thinning anymore. It is a full head of hair. I don't have trauma when I look in the mirror. But it's different for a couple reasons. Number one, I am fully in the throes of menopause now. I have to tell you, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. This idea of like menopause versus post-menopause. Like menopause just means you haven't had your period for 12 months. So, okay, I'm in menopause or I'm in post-menopause. Like maybe post-menopause is just like no symptoms whatsoever. And I still have some symptoms because I have like some hot flashes, which are not fun. And sometimes night sweats, but I don't have those much. I don't have anything else. I don't have weight gain. I don't have irritability. I think I'll ask my friends. I'll ask my husband. I don't think I have that. I don't have mood swings. I don't have depression. I have no desire to be on HRT. I know some friends have gotten on it recently, low levels, and it's helping them. There's other reasons they've gone on it for mood, but also some physiological issues. I have no need for that. We will talk about soy in the episode I'm going to do. Also, following this one, we're going to do menopause and perimenopause. We're going to do soy, and we're going to do protein, and why I have, and if you need to, increase the consumption of either soy or protein. So we're going to talk more about that. So I don't know. Am I postmenopausal? Am I menopausal? I don't know, but I am in the throes of menopause. And that's like, I'm just in a different stage in my life. And so my hormones are different. I have, fewer female hormones. I have less estrogen, less progesterone. Like that's just a fact. If I started taking HRT, would my hair be different? I don't know. I mean, I guess I could try. I'm not interested. My hair is good. My hair is fine. The other thing that has really changed with my hair is that there's gray hairs. And I wouldn't have such a hard time with that if it wasn't for the texture that's so different. So yeah, the texture of my hair is different because I have gray hairs. Now, I don't have a full head of gray hair. I do highlight my hair. I don't color my hair. I mean, I highlight it, but I don't have like a full head of, hair dye. It's highlighted. So, I mean, I definitely have still of my original hair color, which is like a light brown, but I highlight it. And whenever I go to my hairdresser, because I have a different hairdresser now, and I do have to drive to go there. She's amazing. I love her to bits and pieces. She's in Lafayette. Her name is Sheila, and her salon is Zahra, Zahra. And every time I go, she's like, yeah, your hair's growing. Here, you can see the roots. So I love that. And I can definitely see the roots. So I know my hair is growing. And I have to tell you that when, I was first recovering from this, it took years for me to feel like, okay, I'm good. I'm not saying it took years for the hair to grow back, but maybe. I mean, like we shed our hair all the time. Of course, 7-year cycles? So yeah, I think it has taken years and it's still, I think, getting better. But she shows me all the time, like, yep, there's your roots. And I see it at home. I see it at home as well. So I feel good. I'm glad. I'm happy about that. And I am still making changes in my diet all the time because I am almost 55 years old. And the nutrient requirements I had when I was 20 are different than the nutrient requirements I have at 54, soon to be 55. And they're different than the requirements I'm going to have when I'm 70 and 80. So I am making changes and shifts all the time, and they're only for the better. So do I think I had a nutrient deficiency? No, I don't. I was not in a nutrient deficiency at all. I think the cause was a shift in my hormones as I was in perimenopause. So that's my experience. But one of the things I want to give to you, and I've given this to some people recently on doing some one-on-ones, is a hair loss self-assessment, which will help determine what next steps you might want to take, but also help you relax a little and show yourself some self-compassion and acceptance, especially if you're like me and entering a different phase of your life. But even wherever you are, if you're in your 20s, I mean, if you're experiencing hair thinning, hair loss, hair receding at your temples or your scalp or whatever, here are the questions I want to put forth for you for your hair loss assessment. Are you over 40? Because hair loss does become more common with age due to hormonal changes and genetics. Genetics play a role in, like, based on your age, okay? Are you over 40? Are you experiencing signs of perimenopause, irregular periods, hot flashes, mood changes? Because these fluctuations during perimenopause can trigger hair thinning or shedding. Are you currently in menopause or postmenopause, whatever you want to call it? So, because declining estrogen and progesterone levels can lead to androgen-related hair loss. The androgenic alopecia could also be related to telogen effluvium. Have you recently given birth? Because postpartum hair shedding, the telogen effluvium, is common due to those hormonal shifts after delivery. Have you experienced a significant stressor? So one of those major stressors we talked about, like illness, surgery, some major life change. Is your hair falling out evenly across your scalp, or are you noticing specific areas like a widening part or crown thinning or patches? So depending on how the hair is falling out across your scalp, that could help you determine what it might be. Have you noticed changes in your overall health, like fatigue, like weight changes, like brittle nails? Because some of these symptoms could determine whether or not there's an underlying issue, thyroid issues, anemia, nutrient deficiency. Have you recently changed your diet or noticed significant weight loss? Are you taking any new medications? And do you have a family history of hair loss? So these are the questions I want to pose to you. If you are already in our community, you will get a written version of this. And if you, as a woman, answered yes to any of these or to multiple questions, yes, first of all, I would encourage any of you to keep a hair loss journal to track changes and triggers. And I would encourage you to keep just kind of a hormone journal. You know, if you are a woman in your 40s, you know, note when you're getting your last period. Note when you're feeling night sweats. Like, note this so you can look back and kind of, you know, you can map it out better. You can just definitely draw a line a lot better. So keep a hair loss journal. Number 2, consult with a dermatologist or start with your primary doctor, because if you have to get a referral or what have you, go to your doctor, go to your gynecologist, talk to them about specific blood tests, get your hormone levels checked, get your thyroid function checked, get your nutrient level checked. They will probably refer you to a dermatologist as well, but definitely get this work done, the blood work done, the urinalysis. Get this work done. Work with a healthcare professional. Now, I want to emphasize that nutrient deficiencies can cause hair loss, but before you start taking huge amounts of supplements outside of the nutrients you're already getting from food or from your favorite multivitamin, maybe it's complement, it's best to first determine what your nutrient levels are. So we're going to talk about deficiencies. And remember, there is a difference between deficiencies, like actual deficiencies, and low numbers. There's a difference between those two. Now, I want to also refer you to my Know Your Numbers episode. It's called From Cholesterol to Vitamins, The Importance of Blood Work in Monitoring Health and Preventing Disease. Long title. Go listen. You can also find kind of a summary of it at joyfulvegan.com. Just type in cholesterol, type in vitamins, type in blood work, you'll find it. Because I really want to encourage you to understand the importance of blood work. And then you can listen to the one I did on omega-3s, because when I tested for those, we were definitely under. My husband and I were both under. And we increased our omega-3s, and guess what? Our numbers are great. So it's just the best way to kind of know what to do next. And as I said earlier, what might stop hair loss is not what might necessarily promote hair growth. Stopping hair loss and promoting new hair growth are two different processes. So when you're looking this up online, you might be getting just disparate information because those are two disparate things. So what stops hair loss? It might be improving nutrient levels you might be deficient in. Won't necessarily regrow lost hair. It does create the right conditions for growth because it's stopping the loss. But please keep that in mind. They are very different. So we're going to talk about what these nutrients are. Get your blood work done. See what they are. See if they're normal, low, deficient, whatever. And then I'm going to talk about what things you can do to stimulate hair growth, if there's anything at all. So drum roll. That's coming. But first, let's talk about the nutrients most people think about when they think about hair loss. Number one, iron. Even if your blood tests come back normal, and I'll give you some numbers for normal, it's worth noting that being on the lower end of the range for ferritin is what they're going to test for iron, that's stored iron, that can still impact hair health. More than that, one thing to keep in mind, and I've been saying this for as long as I've been doing this work, vegans tend to have lower iron stores, lower ferritin levels compared to omnivores. But even though vegans tend to have lower ferritin levels, they don't necessarily have higher rates of iron deficiency anemia. So unless someone has symptoms of deficiency like fatigue, dizziness, pale skin, lower ferritin alone isn't necessarily a concern, especially if hemoglobin and other markers are normal. So again, people in our community, you're going to get these numbers spelled out for you, but I'll just give them to you here. I know it's a lot to take in numbers, but I'll give you a reference point. I'll tell you my ferritin levels for my last blood work. So above 100 is optimal. That means you have plenty of stored iron. So that's what ferritin levels are. It's the stored iron. Above 100, optimal. I was 119. David was 122. Normal is from 30 to 100. Okay? So you might be 50, and that might seem low, and it might be for you, but normal is 30 to 100. Low iron stores is 15 to 30. So 15 to 30 is low, possible early deficiency. 30 to 100 is normal. Above 100 is optimal. Below 15, you're in iron deficiency. Below 10, that's a severe iron deficiency. It's often linked to anemia. So get your numbers done. Now, remember, when you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet, you are most likely getting all of your iron from iron-rich plant foods, the lentils, the tofu, the tempeh, the quinoa, the chickpeas, all of your legumes, pumpkin seeds, right? Dark leafy greens, but you're going to increase the absorption of that iron by eating those foods with vitamin C. So citrus, juice, lemon zest, bell peppers, strawberries, right? So make a nice big green salad, dark leafy greens high in iron, get some orange juice, vinaigrette, add some bell peppers, strawberries. You're going to be good. You're going to want to also check your B12 status, which is, important. We'll talk about B12 deficiency, but B12 deficiency can mimic or contribute to anemia. So you want to make sure your B12 numbers are also really good. And lysine, the essential amino acid lysine, is also it aids iron absorption. So again, you're going to eat legumes and your greens, you're going to get your iron, you're going to get your iron absorption. So I don't doubt that you're probably getting all of the iron you need. You do not want to just start taking iron supplements willy-nilly without knowing if your iron status is suboptimal. If your iron stores are not low, hear me now. Because I know that you think, I'm losing some hair and it's thinning out. I'm going to go take some iron. If your iron stores are not low, taking iron supplements will not boost hair growth since the body already has what it needs. And you might be causing more harm because excess iron, actually, it's problematic. It can lead to toxicity. It can cause issues like constipation. It could cause liver damage. It can cause increased oxidative stress. You don't want to just take you don't have excess iron, okay? So work with your healthcare professional, get your iron tested, and work with them if you're going to take some supplements. Now, I will say that the essentials that I take with Complement the complement essentials I take, which I recommend, and you can go to joyfulvegan.com. You can find them on the homepage. You can find them on any blog post in the sidebar. You can get a discount for them every time also you order. And I highly recommend you do that. And you use the link and you use the code over at joyfulvegan.com and you get 15% off of complement as well. So 15% off plain, 15% off complement, but you need to use the link and you need to use the code. And that goes for any product at Plain Products, and it goes for any product at Complement. So Complement also has a product called For Her, and I've been taking that one now as well. It does have some iron in it, but it's pretty low. It's like 9 milligrams. Okay. Like a high amount of iron in like a supplement would be like 20, would be 30. So you don't want to go and just do that. The recommended daily intake of iron for adult women premenopausal is 18 milligrams. For men and postmenopausal women, it's 8. So again, I just like the insurance of knowing that if I eat differently every day, or if I'm eating light, or if I'm juicing or fasting or whatever, I want to make sure I'm getting all the nutrients. So taking something like For Her will give me that iron every day. And I feel really good about that. And that goes for the complement essentials, that goes for my omega complex, and that goes for the For Her formulation. So you can find out more about it. Go to joyfulvegan.com, click on the link that has the special code because I'm their affiliate, and you get that code. You get that discount if you use the code using that link. You can go read more about For Her. And so that's an amount that I think is fine. But if you start taking more than that in a supplement, I just think you should do that under the advisement of a doctor. Okay. The next nutrient that people hear about when they think about hair loss is zinc. Really tempting to find information on the internet about these nutrients that are going to increase hair growth, and zinc is one of them. Zinc supplements will not help if you do not have a zinc deficiency. If you have normal zinc levels in your blood, taking zinc will not help and can also have negative side effects. So work with your professional, your healthcare professional, and definitely go get those numbers checked. Now, you also want to make sure that you're getting these specific numbers checked. Not every blood work panel is going to be the same. So if you are due for a blood work, panel, go get all of it, but just make sure before you ask for it that these are the things they're testing for, because you might get it back and there's no zinc test. Vitamin D is another one we hear about. Vitamin D, of course, these are all essential nutrients, by the way. We want to make sure we're getting all of them through food. But vitamin D plays a huge role in creating new hair follicles and maintaining existing ones. So low levels may lead to increased shedding, and that could have been the case with me. That could have contributed. I was at the low level. Remember, I was 31 and a half. But if you truly have a deficiency, it's going to cause more issues, fatigue, muscle weakness, brittle hair. I did have kind of brittle hair, so good. I don't think I was in deficiency, but I think I was low. So vitamin D, primarily obtained through sunlight and fortified foods. You can get it through fortified plant foods, also through the insurance that I love, which is Complement Essentials. They have vitamin D, and it's vitamin D3. Remember, vitamin D3 is the best. It's most easily absorbed by our bodies. It's most bioavailable, but most vitamin D3s is from lanolin, from sheep's wool. And the D3 that Complement uses is from lichen. So if hair loss is a concern, get those numbers checked and make sure you're taking your Complement Essentials anyway. B12, as we've talked about, and I talk about it at length in the Know Your Numbers episode. Obviously, you want to make sure what your B12 numbers are. The Complement Essential has 300 micrograms of B12 daily. Plenty, because it's recommended that you take like 500 weekly. So plenty, and it's water soluble, so you don't have to worry about taking too much. But deficiency of B12 can mimic iron deficiency anemia, as I mentioned, and it's another possible factor in hair loss. So get your numbers checked. Make sure you're taking B12 for all the reasons. And then next, omega-3 fats. So listen to that episode devoted to omega-3s, called omega-3s, skip the fish, boost your brain. But here, just briefly, they may play a role in hair health as well. Not getting enough can contribute to hair loss or just poor hair quality. So you want the healthy fats from the flax seeds, from the chia seeds, from the algae-based supplements like the complement omega complex. And remember when I said in that episode, we tested, we were low and we increased our omegas. I wasn't that low, but I wanted to boost and I did. And I tested again and I'm at a number I feel really good about. So basically, I take about 14, and so does David, take about 1,400 milligrams of omegas a day. There's 450 milligrams of omegas in the complement essentials, but with that, I was just low, just below the optimal. And so I increased my omegas by taking, along with the complement essentials, I take the omega complex, which is 960 milligrams. So 1,400 a day. And I feel great about that. So go listen to that. And then finally, protein. Mention hair loss to your average Joe on the street, and they're going to tell you that it's probably because you're not getting enough protein. Especially if you're vegan, they're going to say that, right? Now, it's true. Hair is made up of keratin, which is also an etymology, by the way. And keratin is a protein. So getting enough high-quality plant-based protein from sources like lentils and legumes and beans and tofu and tempeh and quinoa, it's essential. Nuts, seeds, all the things. And we're going to talk about increased protein in a separate episode. But if you're eating a nutrient-rich plant-based diet with adequate protein sources, I would be really surprised. I'd be really surprised that it's protein deficiency causing your hair loss. I'd be really surprised. Okay? Severe deficiency, like kwashiorkor, which is prolonged malnutrition, can cause hair thinning, brittleness, increased shedding. But this level of deficiency is rare in well-fed individuals, right? I've often said people who have kwashiorkor, it's not because they weren't getting enough protein, it's because they weren't getting enough food. So if you're getting enough food and you're eating a nice, well-rounded, healthy diet, you're probably fine, but get your protein levels checked. And then the last one I wanted to mention, even though I just said finally with protein, a nutrient that comes up and it's often in top-selling hair loss products is vitamin B7 biotin. I feel like it's very trendy these days to know about biotin. Biotin deficiency does cause hair loss, but there is no evidence-based data that supplementing biotin promotes hair growth. Severe biotin deficiency in healthy individuals eating a normal diet has never been reported. So other than rare deficiency syndromes, it's a myth that biotin supplements increase hair growth. If you truly have a deficiency of any of these things, it's going to cause more issues than just hair loss. So it's something to get a handle on, but you need to get your blood work done to know what your numbers are. So the best thing we can do is eat a nutrient-rich, whole foods, plant-based diet, complement it with a high-quality multivitamin like the complement, and test for any deficiencies, stay hydrated, limit highly processed foods, manage stress, get enough sleep, exercise regularly, know where you are in your own hormonal cycle, reproductive cycle, and just take care of yourself. And work with a healthcare professional to figure out what's going on specifically with your hair. Now, in terms of specific foods, and we're going to wrap up here, there are some really encouraging studies that have come out around particular nutrients in foods that we already know and love. And these studies are very interesting, and I definitely found some really good information over at Nutrient Facts with Dr. Greger. And those are, number one, capsaicin, which you've heard of if you've thought at all about hot peppers. And so hot peppers have capsaicin. In fact, the level of capsaicin determines whether a pepper is just, sweet or mild or hot or super hot. It's the capsaicin. So the capsaicin in hot peppers may promote hair growth by increasing blood flow to hair follicles and stimulating insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, which supports hair health. Now, when Dr. Greger talks about this in his video on how much capsaicin, really what it would be, because I think the study said it was 6 milligrams of capsaicin in the study, 6 milligrams. And in real life, in food, that would be like a third of a habanero or a teaspoon of medium hot red pepper every day. It's a lot. That probably feels like a lot. I'm just the messenger, but that is what you would want to do. Like have a third of a habanero every day. And again, the capsaicin, the hotter a pepper is, the more capsaicin there is. So you're going to want to do that. Now, I haven't looked at, any kind of capsules for this, but go take a look at that. Now, I do actually eat chili every day. I don't know what the level of capsaicin is. I have to go look to see how much capsaicin would be in my chipotle chili powder. I literally eat it every day. And I didn't know anything about this study. I could eat more, but I sprinkle chipotle chili powder on everything from salads to tofu scrambles to popcorn every day. So I might need to eat more to see if it's going to stimulate hair growth for me to get 6 milligrams a day, but I'm just the messenger. Hot peppers, capsaicin. There's some interesting, encouraging studies. Number 2, pumpkin seed oil and pumpkin seeds. So another food that's been studied related to hair loss is pumpkin seed, specifically pumpkin seed oil. And this came out of studies, I think it was in Korea, where the studies were on men. They're doing studies around their prostate. And so they were giving them pumpkin seed oil, and I think it was 320 milligrams of pumpkin seed, 400 milligrams of pumpkin seed, kind of around that range. And they started noticing that the pumpkin seed oil group, right, relative to the placebo group, had a 40% increase in hair count compared to 10% in the placebo group. So even if it doesn't work for hair growth, it could be working for stopping hair loss. So there are other benefits as well. And when he did the math in terms of how much to take, I think he calculated like 2 pumpkin seeds a day. So you can handle 2 or 3 pumpkin seeds a day. But what they found with the pumpkin seed oil was the 40% increase over a 24-week period. So it's about 5.5 months. So you're going to want to be consistent and you're going to want to be patient. But what a delicious experiment, right? So with whole pumpkin seeds, you're also going to be getting the fiber and the fats and the minerals and all the things. Now, I actually went out and got a vegan, well, I say pumpkin seed oil that was vegan because a lot of the pumpkin seed oil has capsules that have gelatin. And so I wanted to get some pumpkin seed oil for my father because he's 93. He's had prostate issues for years. He's on all different kinds of medications for it. And I thought, this is only going to help him. There's no downside to taking some of the pumpkin seed oil every day. And so I told his caregiver to give him a capsule every day along with his other medication. And I'm going to do it too. I just want to see. I'm just curious. So might not do anything, but I'm going to take it consistently. And Diva Nutrition has a pumpkin seed oil with vegan capsules. And I think the capsule's 500 milligrams. So that's very good. It was 400 milligrams in the study. So you can go over to joyfulvegan.com for today's show notes and I'll have a link to that. But Diva Nutrition is the brand. And then finally, in terms of foods to intake, because there's a food that you could use topically, 2 of them, 2 edibles, I'll get there. And that would be the isoflavones in soy, particularly the isoflavone called genistein. It may help reduce hair loss by inhibiting that DHT, that's the hormone that's linked to hair thinning and baldness. And you get 75 milligrams of isoflavones eating a 3/4 cup of tempeh or just straight soybeans. You can go calculate isoflavones. We're going to talk more about them when we get to the soy episode. But increase your soy intake and you're going to get more isoflavones, and that could potentially help as well. Now, as far as the topical treatments, remedies that you're going to see online, there are some really interesting, encouraging studies around caffeine, but not caffeine you would take in. If I had increased hair growth from the amount of caffeine that I drank, I would have 3 times the amount of hair, 10 times the amount of hair that I have right now, because I drink 4 cups? No. Yeah, like 4 to 5 cups of tea a day. And it's in green tea, and so there's caffeine in green tea. But it's not from drinking it. It's actually using it as a topical. And so there are like hair products you can buy that has caffeine, and it seems to also work because of it blocking the effects of that DHT, that dihydrotestosterone. That's the hormone that's linked to hair loss. We talked about it when we talked about androgenic alopecia. So it can increase circulation to the scalp as well to promote healthier hair follicles. So it could work. Again, it could support hair growth. It could stop hair loss. But that's something to consider It's not going to be a magic bullet. I'm just the messenger, but that's one thing I do see encouraging studies on. And then rosemary oil is another one. Dr. Greger says, as he says, it's been put to the test. So 100 balding men were randomized to twice a day minoxidil, which is the Rogaine, versus a rosemary lotion. And one of the shampoos, by the way, at Plain Products is a rosemary scent, so you can get rosemary. But it took 6 months, but eventually there were significant improvements in hair counts in both groups. So those taking the minoxidil, the Rogaine, those using the Rogaine, and those using the rosemary. Now you can make this at home by mixing 10 drops of rosemary essential oil per fluid ounce to your favorite lotion and then rubbing a quarter teaspoon into your scalp twice a day. Now I'm not going to do that because I got my hair and I don't want to get lotion on but you can try it and you can try different products that have rosemary oil. So you can definitely try that yourself, rub it into your scalp and see if that works. It, like I said, it took, take 6 months. So you're going to want to do that consistently. Now that's going to typically work with the androgenic alopecia. But if you are having hair thinning and if you're seeing that your part is just more, expanded, rub it right in there. Rub it right on the scalp. Rub it right in the areas where you're seeing the hair loss. Okay. Finally, the minoxidil. So this is the Rogaine. I mentioned earlier that I was not interested in taking it. I think it does tend to work more for the androgenic alopecia. So I don't think it was going to work for me anyway, because I think mine was the telogen effluvium. But there, it does work. I mean, if this is something that you want to try, studies show that around 40 to 60% of men and 60% to 70% of women see positive results. But you stop taking it and then the benefits reverse within a few months. So it has to be applied consistently twice a day for at least 2 to 4 months to see noticeable results. And the full benefits might take up to a year. So you can try that. But again, I would work with your dermatologist. One thing that was interesting, and I discovered this when I was working with a client in particular, doing a one-on-one, who was experiencing hair loss. Interestingly, there's been some really interesting studies around dermatologists that are prescribing oral minoxidil. And the New York Times had a story about it. I sent this to my client, and it was really interesting because what they discovered was that the lower dose pill version of the topical treatment actually seemed to work. So again, I would work with your healthcare professional on this, but that might be something to consider when you're throwing everything at the wall to reverse the hair loss and to help the hair growth. You're going to want to kind of look at all of the factors and you're going to want to look at all of the possible remedies, but you're going to want to look at what works. And you're going to want to do this with some support. So that is everything I have. What did I predict? An hour and 15 minutes? It is almost an hour and a half. I told you I had a lot to say. I'm sorry. I could have broken this up into 2 episodes, but I just feel like that's cheating because I'm not trying to stretch this out for you to listen to the second episode. Stay tuned for the second. I don't know. I could have definitely spaced it out, split it up, but I didn't. And so for all of this, for you, for the hours that I have spent on this, and I am telling you, this took me days and days. I really, really appreciate your support. So if you want to go and become part of our community, please go to patreon.com or just go to joyfulvegan.com and do any of the things that I mentioned. Register for our conference that's coming up. It's an online retreat on having hope in the dark, having hope and resilience and joy in difficult times. You can get the new Valentine's Day / romance recipes ebook. You can get all the other ebooks that are there as well. You can sign up for a one-on-one. You can book a one-on-one. A lot of people don't know that I do one-on-ones, but you can find it there. You can please pre-order my new book, A Year of Compassion. If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, you can RSVP for the celebration at a local bookstore. That would be at the pre-order page. So if you are looking for where that RSVP is, just click on the pre-order page and you can find it there. You can please go make sure you get some Plain products today. Thank you again, Plain Products. Incredible, zero waste, vegan, cruelty-free hair care that actually works. I can attest to it. I love it. And the zero waste work they're doing is amazing. Refillable system, keeps plastic out of the landfills. They keep expanding their lineup. They have a new cherry almond deep conditioner. This fragrance is just like out of this world. It's incredible, and I absolutely love it. If you use purple shampoo, which is great for blondes and for silver foxes, my husband uses the purple shampoo. They've got a zero waste purple shampoo as well. They have body care, face care, and more. But you need to go to joyfulvegan.com, use the link, and use the code. Your hair will thank you. I thank you for the animals. This is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thanks for listening.